Hey guys, last time we took the engine out of the Polaris snowmobile. Now we're going to try to take it apart and see if we can see what's wrong. So if you can get in here, I don't know how well you can see it, there's a tag on the engine that says it's made by Fuji. Fuji made all of Polaris's engines back then. It's a Japanese company. It says the size, it actually says 333 cc's. Even though they called them 340, everybody called them 340, hardly anybody had an engine that was actually 340. They just all called them that. So this one's 333. So first thing we're gonna do is take the spark plugs out, and we'll see if there's any obvious damage on those. So far, I'm looking for pieces of metal to have this thing bent or something to show that there was metal floating around. Doesn't look like any on that one. They're kind of black, but that's not too uncommon to see. This one looks pretty good too. There's no obvious damage, so that's a good sign. So next we're going to take our exhaust pipe off. When you take these off, mark it, because on some of them they can go on either way, and it might not might not go to the other pipe quite right if we put it on upside down. So just take something. We're going to scratch it a little bit just so I know, and we'll take these off. If you notice, I don't know on the camera if it shows up too well, but it's kind of a brass looking nut. They were pretty smart back then. They used that on exhaust bolts so they never really rust on. You can always get them off. They should do that on cars. I think it costs too much money is why they don't do it on cars. Because this is a liquid cooled engine, there's no cooling fins. Everything looks smooth. If this was an air cooled engine, it would have fins in it to help cool it off. Liquid cooled makes much more power than air cooled engines because the clearances are a lot tighter. They can make much more power, run higher compression, everything. So now if you look, there's some corrosion came out of here. I don't see any pieces, which is I'm still feeling pretty good about. Maybe we can fix this thing. Next thing we're gonna do is we have to take this cover off. To expose the water pump. Water pump is belt driven, and sometimes these belts would break. People don't even know it, and the thing would overheat all the time. This one's still intact, so that's a good sign too. At least we know that's not the reason this thing doesn't run. I'm gonna grab a socket quick. And we're gonna take that belt loose. Everything on this thing will be metric because it is a Japanese engine. A little tight. Can't get it off there. We're going to take the water pump off the engine itself. Actually, we can leave it on. We're going to take the head off next. If you can see, hopefully you can see that on the camera, there's big bolts and small bolts. Take the small bolts out first. And the reason that is, the big bolts being stronger can hold it down better. If we took the big ones out first, we could damage the small studs. Probably not going to, but always use caution. Always be safe. Engine. Also, the cylinder head, let me turn this better. The cylinder head is all one piece. A lot of engines, it's two separate heads, one for each cylinder. If that was the case with this one, we want to mark the head, scratch it, put a number 1 on, whatever you have to do, you always want it to go back in the same place. We can't put this one in the wrong place, so it's not really that important on this one, but always look for that. Hopefully this gun is strong enough to take off these bigger ones. We'll see. Uh-oh, battery's sounding a little low. So far we're doing okay. We'll see if this comes loose. You can use a dead blow hammer. That's our cylinder head. No real obvious damage yet. If you notice, there's no valves. That's the reason I wanted to do this engine, so you guys could see there's no valves in this engine. It's a 2-stroke engine. And basically, the piston acts as the valve. So if I can get this apart all the way, I can hopefully make it make sense. So we'll see if I can get the cylinders to come off. I still can't turn it, which is, we knew going in. This side, probably hard to see on the camera, but this side was moving a little bit. This side is not. Oh, it's starting to move. If you could see it, could you see it on the camera? I'm not sure if you could or not. Because the cylinders move, there's a gap here now. That is telling me, because when I was prying on that, I could see this start to turn. The crankshaft was starting to turn. So that's telling me what's wrong is the piston. Can you see that rocking? Hopefully you can. This one I can see moving. It looks to be that this piston is stuck. And it is definitely stuck. So we're going to put some penetrating oil in there and let it soak for a while. and hopefully that'll break that loose so we can get it apart. The good news is I don't see any big damage, so this still might be fixable, maybe buying a couple pistons. I was hoping to be able to get that apart today. There might be a part 3. Let's see if I can get it off there. I cannot. So I don't know if the camera, can you see at all in there? I don't know how well you can see that.
Oh, yeah.
It's not a, can you see pretty good?
Sure.
Okay. So on a 2-stroke engine, normally we know on our 4-stroke engines, the engine has to turn twice to do all 4 strokes. On a 2-stroke engine, every time the crankshaft turns once, you get a power stroke. There is actually fuel and air being drawn in underneath the piston. So that's your intake stroke. And it's blocked off by the piston so it doesn't come out the exhaust until we want it to. If I can get this apart all the way, I'll be able to explain that better. But basically the biggest difference in 2 strokes is there's a power stroke every time the crankshaft turns. So they're great for power. And you're thinking, well, why don't we use them in everything? 2-stroke engines are not very good emission-wise. Because they burn oil and gas, you get smoke, bad for emissions. So the government would never even let you use them. The good news is they're super light and they make a lot of power. So for snowmobiles, some motorcycles, they use 2-stroke engines because they were so great. I was hoping to be able to get this apart, but the biggest thing I wanted you to get so far was these engines don't have valves. I'm excited about this because I still think this engine's fixable. I'll probably be adding another one to this when I can finally get this broken loose, because I really feel like the engine's this piston is stuck in there. Everything else, at least right now, seems to be okay. And if that's the case, pistons are cheap, relatively cheap, $150, and we'll get some new gaskets and this thing. Hopefully we can get running. So for today, I'm going to say that's all. And I'm going to work on getting this apart so next time we can show you exactly how a 2-stroke engine works. All right? See you next time.